What is going on in Syria? Who are the key players? What's happened in the past? Where do we go forward? Let's get straight into it. As you're probably aware, a few days ago, the rebels or resistance fighters, they took over the city of Aleppo after like 8 years of a stalemate. So what's the backstory to this and how were these rebels so successful? We've got to go a few years back to 2011 where the Arab Spring began. This is where the majority Sunni population within Syria rose up against Bashar al-Assad because of their poor quality of life. Now Bashar al-Assad actually turned the Syrian army on the civilians. Certain factions from the Syrian army broke up and they became resistance fighting groups to combat the attacks of Bashar al-Assad. Long story short, after like 13 years, many of these groups ended up fizzling out. Some accepted to live under Bashar and his regime, and some were pushed to the north of Syria, the main stronghold being the city of Idlib and smaller settlements along the Syrian-Turkish border. It was these very resistance fighters from the north of Syria who were the ones who ended up taking Aleppo only a few days ago. Now the recent capture of Aleppo highlights the involvement of a few key regional players. Number one is Turkey. The Turkish government has been funding and supporting the resistance fighters in Idlib and along this border for the past few years now. In fact, Turkey has got a lot more involved in Syria itself, creating a buffer zone in the north of Syria, even establishing military bases and posts along the border. Now this is really to benefit Turkey in two main ways. Number one is to combat against the Kurds who seek their own independent state within the region. And number two, to manage the millions of refugees that have fled from Syria to Turkey over the past few years. Now as for the Kurds, the reason why Turkey has been supporting and funding some of these resistance fighters is so that these Syrian resistance fighters are the ones fighting against the Kurds on behalf of Turkey. And this has happened in the past. As for the refugee issue, this has really hurt public opinion for Erdogan in Turkey, and he needs to now manage it somehow. He wants to send 2 to 3 million refugees back to Syria. But he can't do that if Syria is in the middle of a war zone. The reason why it's in the middle of a war zone and the reason why it's so unstable is because Bashar, backed by Russian airstrikes, have been targeting the civilians again and again, even up till recently. It actually works within Erdogan's benefit that Aleppo falls. Bashar has actually taught a bit of a lesson. You're not able just to stamp out the resistance, come back to the negotiation table, or else you'll get more of the same. This is the case for some of the resistance groups within Syria. If Bashar comes back to the negotiation table, stability will be created in certain parts of Syria and Erdogan can send back the 3 million refugees from Syria. Now how has this conquest been so successful? Remember early on, the only reason why Bashar al-Assad has been able to really hurt the resistance is with the help of Iran and Russia. However, it just so happens to be that Russia is bogged down in a war in Ukraine and Iran, and Hezbollah by extension, is spread thinly in Lebanon. This actually made it a brilliant opportunity for the resistance fighters to strike the enemy whilst they're in a weak spot. Now only time will tell if Russia and Iran can once again come to the rescue of Bashar al-Assad, but at the moment it seems unlikely. There are a few other key points that generally people ask. There's huge propaganda out there that these resistance fighters in Syria are Zionists. People are saying, oh look, they are attacking Bashar, who is supported by Hezbollah. Such a precarious time to take the attention of Hezbollah away from its battle against Israel in Lebanon, forcing it to give most of its attention and resources in Syria. And this is just a big fat lie. It is absolutely well known that the resistance fighters within Syria are not Zionists. They're not backed by the Zionist occupiers. They are from the Sunni population that rose up against Bashar al-Assad in 2011. Neither the people of Syria nor the people of Palestine view this as any kind of selling out. In fact, there were sirens played within Palestine celebrating the fact that their Sunni brethren in Syria had taken over Aleppo. Some people may say, look, even though these fighters may genuinely be resisting persecution and oppression, but now is not the right time, because indirectly fighting against Hezbollah in Syria has weakened them in Lebanon, and in effect it's actually strengthened Israel. And this is just not the case. Hezbollah, Iran and the Shia regimes have never been a real threat to Israel. The Iranian-backed Shia militia groups do not even view Israel as a real enemy. Their real enemy is the Sunni population. That's always been the case. Some people say, oh, this is just a sectarian issue. Sunnis versus Shias, they can't stand each other, and this is why they've fought. That is one big fat lie. Again, it's not a sectarian issue. It's an issue of resistance. These people have been barraged. These people have been persecuted. Check out Sednaya prison. Check out what happened in 2011. Check out what Bashar al-Assad did. Check out what his dad did, Hafez al-Assad. These are oppressors and tyrants, and they turned their power against their own population, and so the population really had no choice but to respond in kind. Some people would argue that, look, this shows Turkey to be the good guys. They're supporting the resistance. And once again, no, they're not doing this to help their brethren in faith. They are doing this, like we mentioned, for their own two benefits: to combat the Kurds, to manage the refugee crisis. Turkey has been funding and supplying some of these resistance groups only to survive, but never to get true full victory. Lastly, and most importantly, where do we go from here? Allahu A'lam. It depends on how the resistance fighters coordinate themselves. Syria is notably famous and very different from the other Arab Springs for being deeply Islamic, rooted in Islam to a certain degree. And this is something that the West does not like to see. This is something that Russia does not like to see. This is something that the Gulf nations have not liked to see. And this is why we have found a global propaganda against the resistance in Syria, that they are fundamentalists, that they are Islamists, they cannot be trusted, that they are violent. But the true fact of the matter is that because the population of Syria are Muslims who believe in the orthodox understanding of Islam, then in effect everybody around them has become their enemy. Where this will go exactly, we don't really know. But one thing we do know is that without the removal of the tyrannical regimes that we have in the Muslim world, and without the implementation of a system based on the thoughts and the feelings and the ideas of the population living there, which is Islam, then unfortunately there can never be any respite for us as a Muslim Ummah. And the average Muslim in Syria, they understand this, and they have sacrificed for this for the last 13 years.